Your Honor, my mom passed before sunrise. I lost it. I drove too fast trying to see her one last time. Please, just give me a break.
You will never believe the ending of today's story. On a grim Tuesday morning, as rain poured relentlessly over the city, the doors to my courtroom swung open, carrying with them a chill draft and a figure stumbling inside. His name was Daniel, a 22-year-old young man, looking gaunt, his shoulders slumped as if he were carrying the weight of the collapsing sky on his back. In his hands, he didn't hold a leather briefcase or a neat stack of documents, but an old, frayed backpack and a fistful of crumpled papers, gripped so tightly his knuckles had turned white. From the very moment Daniel stepped up to the podium, the air in the courtroom seemed to freeze. His eyes were red and swollen, looking as though he had wept through the entire night. The shirt he wore was buttoned unevenly, and his hands trembled violently as he placed the citations on the clerk's desk. At first glance, this was the classic image of a tragedy, a misguided kid being crushed by life. But there was something else, a sharp intuition honed over thousands of trials that sent a cold chill down the back of my neck. It wasn't out of sympathy, but out of a vague, nagging suspicion. Your Honor, I'm sorry, his voice cracked, hoarse and sounding like gravel grinding together. I know I was wrong. I know I was speeding. But she's gone. That sentence dropped into the middle of the courtroom like a 1,000-pound stone. She, his mother. Daniel began to recount the fateful phone call at 3 a.m. from the hospital about his mother dying in the ICU after a sudden stroke. He spoke of the panic, of rushing to the car, slamming his foot on the gas in desperation, with only one thought in his mind, to hold his mother's hand one last time before she took her final breath. As I listened, I observed the entire room beginning to sway along with his emotions. The people in the gallery started sniffing. The police officer in the corner, a man usually stone-faced, had to look down at his boots. Even my court clerk, who has witnessed every kind of criminal imaginable, secretly wiped away a tear. The story was too perfect, too painful, a filial son, a family tragedy, and a mistake born solely from blind love. In front of me, the record screamed, 95 miles per hour in a 50 zone, running red lights, weaving through traffic, a sentence that could send anyone to jail immediately. But Daniel stood there, tears rolling down his cheeks, his lips trembling as he spoke of the hardworking mother who raised him by washing dishes, about the promise to become a doctor to cure her, a promise that had now evaporated into smoke. He didn't ask for a reduced sentence. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just stood there sobbing. I just wanted to make it, but I didn't. When the police stopped me, that was when she died. That was the golden moment of an emotional trial. According to the usual script, this is when the judge takes off his glasses, sighs, speaks words of comfort about the sacred bond of motherhood, and bangs the gavel for acquittal amidst the applause of the room. I could feel that expectation from the crowd. They wanted me to be the benevolent hero. They wanted to see the hug. They wanted to see the forgiveness. But I am Judge Boyd, and my eyes do not see tragedy. I see a performance. There was a very small detail, so small that perhaps no one else in the room noticed it, except for me. When Daniel bowed his head to wipe his tears, his eyes darted quickly toward the security camera mounted on the wall, then flicked rapidly to check the reaction of the crowd behind him. A person in absolute agony over the loss of a mother does not care about the audience. A person crumbling from the inside out does not control the rhythm of their sobbing so perfectly. I picked up the file, feeling the weight of the justice everyone was waiting for. But instead of a surge of empathy, only one cold question rang in my head. Why is this parking ticket bone dry? When he said he ran through the rain to get in here, I didn't say a word. I just let the silence stretch, tight as a piano wire, across the room. In my court, silence is not empty. It is a weapon. It forces the truth to bubble up when lies have run out of breath. The gallery was waiting for the gavel to bang, for the words dismissed, to grant them the emotional release they were desperate for. But I didn't reach for the gavel. I reached for my reading glasses. Slowly, deliberately, I unfolded the citation again. The paper crinkled loudly in the quiet room. I saw Daniel flinch. Just a micro movement, a twitch of the left eye. To anyone else, it looked like grief. To me, it looked like calculation. Mr. Daniel, I said, my voice dropping an octave, stripping away the warmth that the previous judge might have offered. You stated that you received the call at 3 a.m. You stated you were in a state of absolute panic, rushing to Street Mary's hospital to say goodbye to your mother. Is that correct? He nodded vigorously, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. Yes, Your Honor. I couldn't think. I just drove. And when the officer stopped you, I continued, keeping my eyes glued to the paper. You told him exactly what you told me? That your mother was dying? I tried to, he stammered, his voice trembling perfectly. But he wouldn't listen. He just wrote the ticket. He didn't care. A murmur of outrage rippled through the audience. Shame, someone whispered loudly behind me. They hated the faceless police officer now. They loved the crying boy. The narrative was solidifying. The police are the villains. The boy is the victim. And I was supposed to be the savior. But here is the thing about paper. It doesn't have emotions. It doesn't care about your story. It only cares about facts. And right there, in the officer's notes section, a small box that most judges skim over in seconds was a sentence that didn't fit the script. Subject was laughing on the phone when approached. I looked up. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating with misplaced empathy. I looked at Daniel. He was still looking down, playing the part of the broken son. Daniel, I said, leaning forward, you said you were rushing to Street Mary's. That is the hospital on the east side, correct? Yes, sir. Then can you explain to me? I tapped the paper with my index finger, a slow, rhythmic thud, why you were clocked doing 95 miles per hour on Route 44, heading west. The sobbing stopped, instantly. It wasn't a gradual calm. It was a mechanical shutoff. For a split second, the mask slipped. The grieving sun vanished, and beneath it, I saw a flash of cold, hard calculation. His eyes darted left, then right. He was processing the lie, searching for a patch to cover the hole I had just punched in his story. I was confused, he stuttered, the tears returning but with a delay that felt artificial. I took the wrong turn. I was out of my mind, Your Honor. I didn't know where I was going. The crowd bought it. Of course, he was confused. He was in shock. A woman in the front row actually stood up and shouted, "Leave the boy alone. He lost his mother." My bailiff stepped forward, hand on his belt, but I raised a hand to stop him. Let them scream. Let them hate me. Because they were watching a movie, but I was reading the evidence. Confusion is one thing, Daniel, I said, my voice cutting through the noise like a scalpel. But physics is another. Route 44 West leads away from the city, away from the hospital, and away from the address listed on your license. You weren't driving toward your dying mother, you were driving toward the casino. The room gasped. It wasn't a gasp of realization, it was a gasp of disbelief. They didn't want to believe me. They wanted to believe the tears. They looked at Daniel, waiting for him to deny it, to scream that I was a liar, to defend his honor. But Daniel didn't scream. He did something much more interesting. He stopped trembling. He straightened his posture, just an inch. And for the first time, he looked me dead in the eye. There was no sadness in that look. There was a challenge. My mother is dead, Judge, he said, his voice suddenly steady, devoid of the gravelly sorrow from moments ago. Are you really going to call me a liar over a wrong turn? He was doubling down. He was using the ultimate shield death to deflect the logic. It was a bold move, a dangerous move. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a kid trying to get out of a ticket. This was something far darker. I closed the folder. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I am not calling you a liar, Daniel, I said, leaning back in my chair. But I am going to make a phone call. Because if your mother truly passed away at 3:30 a.m., as you claim, then there will be a death certificate. And if there is a death certificate, this ticket disappears. I paused, letting the threat hang in the air. But if I call Street Mary's and they tell me something different, then you are not just looking at a speeding ticket, you are looking at perjury. I reached for the phone on my bench. The dial tone echoed through the speakerphone like a heartbeat monitor flatlining. It was a rhythmic, electronic pulse that seemed to count down the seconds of Daniel's credibility. I didn't look at the phone. I looked at him, For the first time since he walked in, the young man stopped looking at the floor. He stopped looking at the audience. His eyes were locked on that black receiver sitting on my bench. The tears had dried up completely, replaced by a sheen of sweat on his upper lip. It wasn't the sweat of a grieving son reliving a nightmare. It was the sweat of a gambler watching the roulette wheel spin, praying it doesn't land on zero. Street Mary's Hospital, admissions. A pleasant, unaware voice chirped through the speaker. The entire courtroom flinched. The woman in the front row, the one who had shouted earlier, was now leaning forward, her knuckles white as she gripped the wooden bench. She wanted me to be wrong. They all did. They wanted the hospital to confirm the tragedy so they could hate me properly. They wanted the villain to be the man in the robe, not the boy in the wrinkled shirt. "Good morning," I said, my voice flat, professional, stripping away any hint of the drama unfolding in front of me. "This is Judge Boyd from the municipal court. I am currently presiding over a case involving an emergency situation reported at your facility early this morning." "How can I help you, Judge?" the voice asked. "I need to verify the admission and subsequent passing of a patient in your ICU," I said, keeping my eyes drilled into Daniel. Time of death stated as approximately 3:30 a.m. this morning. Name, Martha. Daniel's mother. Daniel flinched. He took half a step back from the podium, his hand instinctively reaching for the backpack he had set on the floor. It was a flight response. His body knew the game was over before his brain could accept it. There was a pause on the line, the sound of typing. Click, click, click. Those 3 seconds were longer than any prison sentence I have ever handed down. In that silence, the energy in the room shifted. The fog of war, that thick, emotional cloud Daniel had generated with his performance, began to lift. The audience stopped looking at him with pity and started looking at him with doubt. Why was he backing away? Why was he looking at the exit sign? "One moment, Judge," the receptionist said. "I'm checking the overnight logs." "Please take your time," I replied. "Daniel," I whispered, covering the mouthpiece with my hand, but letting the microphone pick up every syllable. "You have exactly 10 seconds before she comes back on the line. If there is anything you want to amend in your statement, now is the time. Perjury is a felony. A speeding ticket is a fine. Do the math." His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the gallery, searching for the sympathy that had shielded him just moments ago. But the shield was gone. The woman in the front row wasn't shouting anymore. She was frowning, confusion etching lines into her forehead. I might have," Daniel started, his voice cracking. But this time, the crack wasn't from sadness. It was from fear. "I might have gotten the hospital wrong. Maybe it was Rhode Island Hospital." "I was panicked, Judge. I told you." "You said street. Mary's 3 times. Daniel," I reminded him, cold as ice. "You described the lobby. You described the nurses." "Judge Boyd?" The voice on the speaker returned, sharp, clear, definitive. "I am here," I said. "I have checked the logs for the ICU, the ER, and the general morgue intake for the last 24 hours, the woman said. "We have had no admissions under that name, and we have had no fatalities reported in the hospital since yesterday afternoon." The air left the room. It didn't just get quiet. It got vacuum sealed. The collective gasp from the gallery was audible. The woman in the front row covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with shock. The narrative had collapsed. The perfect victim had just been exposed as a perfect liar. I didn't hang up immediately. I let the words hang there, suspended in the air, like smoke. "Are you certain?" I asked, for the benefit of the crowd. "Could there be a mistake in the system?" "No, sir," she replied efficiently. "I even checked the Jane does. We are empty, Judge." "Thank you, ma'am." I placed the receiver back on the cradle. The click sounded like a gunshot in a canyon. I slowly took off my reading glasses and folded them. I looked down at Daniel. He wasn't crying anymore. He wasn't shaking. He was standing there, frozen, stripped naked of his lie. The grieving son costume had fallen off, revealing the arrogance underneath. "So," I said, my voice dangerously low, "your mother is not dead. She is not at Street Mary's. And you were driving west, toward the casino, laughing on the phone with your friends." Daniel's face twisted. It wasn't shame. It was anger. The anger of a narcissist who realizes he has lost control of the room, You don't know what I'm going through, he snapped, his voice suddenly aggressive, the soft boy persona vanishing instantly. So what if I lied about the hospital? I was stressed. Do you know how hard my life is? You sit up there in that robe judging me, but you don't know me. He pointed a shaking finger at me. A fatal mistake. You tricked them, he spat, gesturing to the audience. You made them turn on me. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. A harsh, grinding sound. I didn't trick anyone. Daniel, I said, my voice filling the room without the need to shout. I simply asked a question that you were too arrogant to prepare for. You thought tears were a currency you could spend in my courtroom. You thought if you cried hard enough, the law would melt. I picked up the ticket. But here is the reality. You used the death of a parent, the most painful experience a human being can go through, as a shield to get out of a $100 fine. You mocked every person in this room who has actually stood by a deathbed. You stole their sympathy. I looked at the bailiff. Officer, please secure the doors. Nobody leaves. Daniel's eyes went wide. What? For a speeding ticket? No, Daniel, I said, opening a new file on my desk. The speeding ticket is the least of your problems now, because while you were grieving, my clerk ran your license plate properly. I held up a second piece of paper. This one wasn't a ticket. It was a printout from the state database. It had a red stripe across the top. Care to tell the room whose car you were actually driving? The silence in the courtroom was different now. It wasn't the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of a predator watching its prey realize there is no escape. I held the paper with the red stripe in my hand, letting it dangle like a pendulum. Martha Daniel. I read the name aloud, my voice echoing off the wood paneling. That is the name of the registered owner of the 2018 Honda Civic you were driving. The same Martha Daniel you claimed took her last breath at 3:30 a.m. this morning. Daniel's face went pale. Not the stage makeup pale he had worn earlier, but a sickly, gray color that only comes when the blood drains out of you from pure, unadulterated terror. He gripped the podium, his knuckles turning white again, but this time it wasn't to steady himself, it was to keep from collapsing. I asked you whose car you were driving, I repeated, my eyes boring into him. It's my mom's, he whispered, his voice barely a squeak. The arrogance from moments ago had evaporated, replaced by the desperate flailing of a drowning man. I told you, I took it to get to the hospital. I didn't steal it. You didn't steal it. I raised an eyebrow, scanning the document in front of me. That is interesting, because at 4:15 a.m., 45 minutes after you claimed she died, a call was placed to the Providence Police Department. I paused for effect. The gallery leaned in, hooked on every word. The woman in the front row, the one who had defended him, looked sick to her stomach. She realized now that her empathy had been weaponized against her. The caller was a woman, I continued, pacing my words like a metronome. She was frantic. She stated that her son, a Mr. Daniel, had taken her keys while she was sleeping, emptied her purse of $300 in cash, and drove off. The room erupted. It wasn't just whispers anymore. It was an audible wave of disgust. Oh my God, someone gasped. The image of the dutiful son rushing to a deathbed shattered instantly, replaced by the image of a thief robbing his own mother in the middle of the night. She isn't dead, is she, Daniel? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a shout. He shook his head, looking down at his shoes. No. Look at me, I commanded, slamming the file onto the bench. The sound made him jump. You looked at me when you lied. You looked at me when you cried. You will look at me now that you are telling the truth. Is your mother dead? No, he mumbled, tears streaming down his face again. But these were real tears, tears of shame, tears of a child caught with his hand in the jar, except the jar was his mother's livelihood and the cookie was a felony. So, let me get this straight, I said, leaning back, allowing the full weight of his actions to settle on the room. You stole your mother's car. You stole her money. You got caught speeding toward a casino. And when the officer stopped you, you decided the best way to get out of a ticket was to kill her off? I was scared, he blurted out, the excuse sounding pathetic in the heavy air. I didn't have the registration. I thought if I said it was an emergency, You thought if you said it was a tragedy, the rules wouldn't apply to you. I corrected him. You weaponized the one thing that demands universal respect, death, and you used it as a get out of jail free card. Do you have any idea how twisted that is? I stood up and walked to the edge of the bench. I looked out at the audience, then back at him. There are people in this room right now who would give anything, anything, to have one more phone call with their mother, to hear her voice one more time. And you buried yours alive for a traffic stop. Daniel was sobbing now, ugly, heaving sobs. But the room remained cold. There was no pity left. He had spent it all on the lie. But here is the twist, Daniel, I said, picking up the phone receiver again. The police report says the officer who took the call told your mother to come down to the station to file the formal complaint. But she didn't want to. She said she was too worried about you. I dialed a number, not the hospital this time. She said she just wanted you home. She refused to press charges because she loves you. She is protecting you, even after you robbed her. I looked at him with a mixture of pity and disdain. Let's see if she still feels that way when she finds out you told a court of law she was a corpse. Don't call her, he begged, his hands reaching out as if he could stop the signal through the air. Please, Judge, don't tell her I said that. Please. She'll. It will break her heart. You should have thought about her heart before you stopped it for your own convenience, I said coldly. Hello, Mrs. Daniel? The voice on the other end was tired, frail, and filled with worry. Yes? Is this the police? Did you find him? Is Danny okay? The sound of her voice, alive, concerned, full of love, was the final nail in the coffin of his character. The contrast between the mother's love and the son's betrayal was so sharp it physically hurt to witness. Mrs. Daniel, I said, my voice softening instantly. This is Judge Boyd. Your son is safe. He is standing right in front of me. Oh, thank God, she wept. Thank God. Is he in trouble? Did he hurt anyone? I looked at Daniel. He was shaking his head, mouthing the word please over and over again. He didn't hurt anyone physically, ma'am, I said, holding his gaze. But he has told the court a very interesting story about why he has your car. I held the phone up to the microphone. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Everyone was leaning forward, straining to hear the voice of the woman who was supposed to be dead. Mrs. Daniel, I said, my voice steady but heavy with the gravity of what I was about to deliver. Your son stands before me charged with reckless driving. But to explain his behavior, to explain why he was speeding in your car, he told this court, under oath, that you had passed away this morning at 3:30 a.m. There was a silence on the line, a long, agonizing static. Then, a sound that broke the heart of everyone in the room. It wasn't a scream. It was a gasp. A sharp intake of breath that sounded like someone had just been punched in the stomach. He said I was dead? Her voice trembled, small and fragile. Danny said that? Yes, ma'am, I confirmed, looking straight at Daniel. He was squeezing his eyes shut, tears streaming down his face, but he couldn't block out her voice. He used your death as an excuse to avoid a traffic fine. Oh, Danny, she wept. It was a sound of pure betrayal. I worked a double shift. Yesterday, I came home and cooked his favorite meal because he said he was stressed about school. I gave him the last $20 in my purse for gas. She paused, choking back a sob. I bought that car for him to go to classes. I didn't press charges because I thought he was just in trouble. I thought he was scared, but he killed me. He killed me to save himself. Daniel cracked. He lunged toward the bench, desperation etched into every feature. Mom, I didn't mean it. I was just panicking. I love you, Mom. Please. I didn't need to bang the gavel. I just held up a hand. You do not speak, I thundered. My voice didn't just fill the room. It shook the walls. You lost the right to call her Mom. The moment you buried her in this courtroom for a discount on a ticket. You listened to her pain. You listened to what you did. On the phone, the weeping had turned into something else. Resignation. Judge Boyd? She asked, her voice stronger now, but colder. I am here, ma'am. Is he going to jail? I looked at Daniel. He looked back at me, terrified. He knew, in that moment, that his fate wasn't in my hands anymore. It was in hers. That depends on you, Mrs. Daniel, I said softly. The speeding ticket is a fine, but taking the car without permission, taking the money, that is a crime. If you want to press charges now that you know the truth, I will have the bailiff take him into custody immediately. The room held its breath. This was the ultimate test, the mother's love versus the son's betrayal. Daniel mouthed the word please again, shaking his head. He has a problem, Judge, she said, her voice cracking with the weight of a secret she had kept for too long. It's the gambling, isn't it? He was going to the casino again. I glanced at the police report on my desk. Route 44 West, toward the Twin River Casino. It appears so, ma'am. I have tried, she whispered. I have paid his debts. I have lied for him. I have given him everything. But if he can kill me off to a stranger, then I can't save him anymore. Daniel's knees buckled. He grabbed the podium to stop from falling. Do what you have to do, Judge, she said, and the finality in her tone was more devastating than any prison sentence. I'm not coming down to get him. I can't look at him right now. I understand, I said respectfully. I am sorry you had to hear this, Mrs. Daniel, but you deserve the truth more than he deserves your protection. Thank you, she whispered. And then the line went dead. The dial tone returned. The connection was severed. And with it, the last lifeline Daniel had. I hung up the phone. I didn't look at the audience. I didn't look at the clerk. I looked only at the young man standing before me, who was now truly alone in the world. You see, Daniel, I said, leaning forward, my voice dropping to a conversational, almost intimate tone. That is what real grief sounds like. It isn't a performance. It isn't a tool. It is the sound of a mother realizing that her son loves himself more than he loves her. I picked up the original ticket, the one he had cried over, the one he had begged me to dismiss. You came in here playing a role. You wanted to be the tragic hero. You wanted the Judge Caprio moment. You wanted the hug. You wanted the viral video where the world feels sorry for you. I stood up, towering over the bench. Well, you are going to get your viral moment, Daniel, but not the one you wanted, because you forgot the most important rule of my courtroom. I signaled to the bailiff. The officer stepped forward, unhooking the handcuffs from his belt. The metallic clink-clink sound was sharp and final. In this court, we don't reward the performance, I said. We dissect it. The bailiff moved with the efficiency of a machine. He didn't rough Daniel up. He didn't need to. He simply took the young man's wrists, pulled them behind his back, and secured them. The sound of the ratcheting metal click, click, click was the only thing audible in the room. It was the sound of reality crashing down on a fantasy. This is a mistake, Daniel gasped, his face pressed against the cool wood of the podium as the officer turned him around. I didn't mean it, Judge, please, my mom, she's just upset. She'll call back. You can't arrest me for a speeding ticket. I watched him struggle, his expensive sneakers squeaking on the linoleum floor. It was pathetic. It was the final, desperate flailing of a narcissist who had never been told no in his entire life. Officer, pause, I said. The bailiff stopped, holding Daniel by the upper arm. The boy looked up at me, hope flickering in his eyes. He thought I was going to show mercy. He thought the Judge Caprio moment was still possible. He thought the hug was coming. I want you to look at the gallery, Daniel, I said, pointing to the people sitting behind him. Look at them. He turned his head slowly. The audience wasn't crying anymore. The woman in the front row, the one who had shouted at me to leave him alone, was now staring at him with a look of pure, unadulterated revulsion. A man in the back row, wearing a veteran's hat, was shaking his head slowly. Do you know why they are looking at you like that? I asked, my voice calm but laced with venom. It isn't because you were speeding. It isn't even because you stole money. It is because you committed emotional fraud. I picked up the stack of tissues he had used to wipe his fake tears. I held them up like evidence. You walked into my courtroom and you hijacked their empathy. You made them feel your pain. You made them remember their own losses. You stole their grief and you wore it like a costume to save yourself a few dollars. That is a theft far worse than the cash you took from your mother's purse. I dropped the tissues into the wastebasket. You wanted to know if I can arrest you for a speeding ticket. Technically, no. In this jurisdiction, A speeding violation is a civil infraction. Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly. He thought he saw a loophole. He thought he could lawyer his way out of this. But, I continued, opening the thick law book on my desk, perjury, lying to a judicial officer, filing a false police report by proxy, and operating a vehicle without the owner's consent. Those are not civil infractions. Those are criminal offenses. I looked at the clerk. Christina, please update the docket. The citation for speeding is upheld. Fine, $100. The citation for running a red light, upheld. Fine, $85. I looked back at Daniel, but we are adding a new charge, contempt of court, for lying under oath about the death of a parent to influence a judicial proceeding. That carries a mandatory sentence of 10 days in the county jail. Immediate remand. 10 days? Daniel shrieked. For lying? You can't do that. I just did, I said simply. And that is just the appetizer, Daniel, because while you are sitting in that cell for 10 days thinking about the mother you killed, the district attorney will be reviewing the transcript of this call. They will be reviewing your mother's statement about the stolen money and the stolen car. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his one last time. By the time you get out of my jail, there will be a warrant waiting for you for grand larceny and auto theft. You wanted to go to the casino? You gambled with your freedom today, son. And you lost everything. The bailiff began to drag him toward the side door, the door that leads to the holding cells, not the exit. Daniel began to kick and scream, the good boy mask completely gone now. I hate you, he screamed, spitting on the floor. You ruined my life. My mom is going to sue you. You're a monster. The crowd watched in silence as the door slammed shut, cutting off his screams. The heavy thud of the metal door sealing him in echoed for a moment, then faded. I sat back in my chair. The adrenaline in the room was palpable. My heart was beating a little faster, not from anger, but from the precision of the takedown. It was surgical. I had excised a tumor from the body of the court. But the show wasn't over. The camera was still rolling. The audience was still watching. And there was one more thing I needed to do. I looked at the empty podium where Daniel had stood. I looked at the crumpled tissues in the trash. And then I looked directly into the camera lens, breaking the fourth wall, acknowledging the millions of people who would eventually watch this on their screens at home. You see, I said to the camera, my voice dropping to that intimate storytelling register again. People ask me why I am so hard. They ask me why I don't hug the defendants like other judges on the internet. They ask me why I don't give everyone a break. I picked up the photo of Daniel's dead mother, a copy of her license I had pulled from the database. A woman who was alive, working a double shift, heartbroken by the son she tried to save. This is why I placed the photo of Martha Daniel, the mother who was alive, working, and heartbroken on the edge of my bench, facing the gallery. It stood there like a silent witness, a rebuke to everyone who had shed a tear for her death just 20 minutes ago. The courtroom was still vibrating from the sound of the cell door slamming. The air felt thin, stripped of the comfortable humidity of shared emotion. Now it was just cold, hard reality. You wanted me to hug him, I said, my voice low, addressing the woman in the front row directly. I didn't say it with anger. I said it with a tired understanding. I saw it in your face. When he cried, you wanted me to step down. You wanted the music to swell. You wanted the redemption arc. The woman looked down, ashamed. She picked at the strap of her purse, unable to meet my eyes. Don't be ashamed, I said, looking up to scan the entire room. It is human nature. We are wired to protect the crying child. We are wired to forgive. It makes us feel good. It makes us feel like the world is a soft, safe place where mistakes are just misunderstandings. I leaned back, steepled my fingers, and let the silence stretch for a beat. But a courtroom is not a safe place, and the world is not soft. I pointed a finger at the empty podium. If I had hugged him, if I had given you the moment you wanted, do you know what would have happened? I didn't wait for an answer. I answered it for them. He would have walked out that door, laughing. He would have gotten back into that stolen car. He would have driven to the casino, and when he lost the last of his mother's money, he would have come home and screamed at her. He would have told her that even the judge, the symbol of authority, was on his side, not hers. The veteran in the back row nodded slowly. He understood. Mercy without truth is not justice, I said, my voice hardening into steel. It is complicity. If I had dismissed those tickets because of his tears, I would have become an accomplice to his abuse of his mother. I would have validated his narcissism. I would have taught him that the most powerful weapon in the world isn't the law, but a lie well told. I picked up the stack of files, the docket for the rest of the day. Real people with real problems. We live in an era of viral justice. You see clips on the internet of judges forgiving everything, of criminals being treated like victims, of consequences vanishing because the story was sad enough, and you click like, you share it, you comment, faith in humanity restored. I looked directly into the camera lens again, holding the gaze of the invisible millions. But that isn't humanity. That is fantasy. Real humanity is messy. Real humanity is a mother working a double shift to pay for a car her son stole. Real humanity is the police officer who has to tell that mother her son lied about her death. I tapped the bench with my pen. Daniel didn't need a hug. He didn't need a break. He needed a wall. He needed to hit something hard enough to shatter the delusion that he is the center of the universe. Today, I was that wall. The woman in the front row finally looked up. Her eyes were dry now. She looked at the photo of the mother. She nodded. It was a small gesture, but it was significant. It was the shift from feeling to thinking. People call me cold, I continued, my voice softening just a fraction, revealing the burden of the robe. They say Judge Boyd has ice in his veins, but I don't do this because I enjoy the punishment. I do this because I respect the victims too much to be charmed by the perpetrators. I looked at the clock on the wall. The morning session was over. The rain was still hammering against the windows outside, washing the city streets. But inside, the air felt cleaner. Compassion is easy, I said, closing the file. Accountability is hard, and my job isn't to make you feel good. My job is to make sure that when you leave this room, you understand the difference between a mistake and a choice. I stood up. The bailiff shouted, "All rise." The room stood up. But this time, they didn't stand out of habit. They stood out of a different kind of respect. It wasn't the warm, fuzzy respect they gave to a kindly grandfather figure. It was the sharp, fearful respect you give to a surgeon who has just cut you open to save your life. I gathered my robe, preparing to leave the bench. But there was one final piece of business, one final message to send, not to Daniel, but to the person who would inevitably have to clean up his mess. "Clerk," I said, pausing at the door to my chambers. "Yes, Your Honor," Christina asked, her voice steady. "Please make a copy of the hearing recording," I said, "and send it to Mrs. Daniel, along with a note from the court." "What should the note say, Judge?" I turned back, looking at the empty courtroom one last time. Tell her that she doesn't have to be his victim anymore. Tell her the court sees her, and tell her. I said she raised him better than this. He just chose not to listen. It has been 6 months since the heavy metal door slammed shut on Daniel's screams, cutting off his performance and sealing him in a reality he could not manipulate. The rain has stopped in the city, but the echoes of that case still linger in the hallways of my courthouse. People often ask me what happens after the cameras turn off. They want to know if the tough love actually works. They want a sequel. They want to know if Daniel learned his lesson, if he found redemption in a jail cell, if he came out a better man. I wish I could tell you that he did. I wish I could tell you that 10 days of cold concrete and a few months for grand larceny turned him into a saint. But this is not a movie. This is life. And in life, narcissists do not change overnight. Daniel is still angry. He writes letters from the county facility, blaming the police, blaming me, blaming the system for ruining his potential. He has not learned humility. He has only learned that his old tricks no longer work. But this story was never about saving Daniel. It was about saving Martha. Yesterday, a letter arrived at my chambers. It wasn't written in the scrawled, desperate handwriting of a prisoner. It was written on clean, crisp stationery. The handwriting was steady. "Dear Judge Boyd," it began. "For 20 years, I lived in a prison of my own making. I covered for him. I paid his debts. I apologized for his mistakes. I thought that was love. I thought if I just loved him enough, he would stop hurting me. I paused, picturing the woman on the other end of the phone line that day, the frail voice that sounded like it was ready to shatter. When you told me he had declared me dead, the letter continued. Something inside me finally broke, but it wasn't my heart. It was the chain. For the first time, I saw him not as my baby, but as a predator. You didn't just put him in jail, Judge. You released me. She went on to say that she did not bail him out. She used the money. She had saved the money he would have stolen for the casino to fix her car. She went back to nursing school. She is sleeping through the night for the first time in a decade. I folded the letter and placed it in the closed file. This is the uncomfortable truth that the internet does not want to hear. If I had hugged Daniel, if I had given the audience the viral moment they craved, Martha would still be a prisoner. She would still be working double shifts to pay for his gambling. She would still be waiting for the next phone call, the next lie, the next theft. My compassion for him would have been cruelty to her. And that is the lesson I leave you with today. We live in a world that is addicted to the performance of goodness. We want the easy tears. We want the soft music. We want the judges who act like grandfathers and the criminals who act like lost children. It makes us feel safe. It makes us feel like justice is simple, but justice is not simple. It is surgical. Sometimes, to save the patient, you have to cut out the infection. You have to be cold. You have to be precise. And you have to be willing to be the villain in the eyes of the crowd, so you can be the hero in the life of the victim. Daniel didn't get his hug. He got the truth. And because of that, a mother got her life back. I am Judge Boyd. I don't sit on this bench to be loved. I sit here to ensure that when the tears stop and the cameras turn off, the right person is left standing. Case closed.